I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Nyquist was unable to be with us this evening. He had another meeting in Sweet Home he had to attend. Okay, we're looking for an approval of the agenda.
We approve the agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Agenda's approved. Comments from the public, Mr. Superintendent.
Mr. Chairman, we have 4 comments that have been presented in writing to you. Their full context will be in the minutes. Commenter number 1 requests that the board adopt an update to policy KGBB. Requests information be shared with parents about the importance of gun safety. This deals with school boards and school districts' ability to eliminate concealed carry on school grounds. Public comment number 2, the commenter makes 1 point, requests a change in middle school grading policy. Public comment number 3, the commenter makes 3 points. It indicates experience with the district as a teacher. It indicates experience with the previous grading committee that happened in this district in the past, and requests a change in the middle school grading policy. Comment number 4 points out an inconsistency in tonight's presentation. I think we were aware of that, and I've worked on that. Okay, so.
Great. Okay, moving on to board business. Tonight, we're going to discuss the budget committee appointment process. We have some budget committee members that are coming up for a vote, and we kind of need to pick the methodology that we're going to use to select the next member. And there's 2 different ways listed upon here. One is we could do it as a complete board and go over everyone, or the other way that we did it last time was we appointed 2 board members to go through the applications and then interview them and come back with suggestions. So I'm looking for some discussion on how you think you might want to go forward with this.
I thought it worked really well last time, but that's up to us as a group. You know, I wasn't part of it last time, other than they brought the people that they recommended to the board. I think it's a better way of going about it. Otherwise, you're publicly talking about people back and forth.
What information did you use, though? They brought,
Whether we ask for applications, and there's a timeline on here, and we can look at that if you want to. And so the applications are submitted, and then the 2 members, if we use that particular methodology, would take those, they would review the criteria of the people that have submitted, because they talk a little bit about their backgrounds and what they've done. And then you can interview them if you have questions, and then you can bring back suggestions on who you think you'd like to bring to the board to vote on to be.
right, but if you're not one of the 2 people, what information are you using to approve or deny the recommendation of the 2?
You read their
Yeah,
application.
you'll see their application. Yeah, and then also, we rely on the board members to give us some input on what they thought was the strengths of the person.
Like what I wasn't part of it last time, and I had one of the 2 people ask a couple questions I was curious about.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know. I want to have some input, but I guess I can see the efficiency of the other method.
Well, I could ensure that you have some input.
Make me one of the 2 that gets to pick, and I'm good with that.
Yeah, there you go. I was part of it last time, so.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's, you sit down and you kind of go through these piles of paper, and there's different zones. So you separate them kind of into zones that they're qualified to be in. And then so you kind of look at your applicants in those zones and see which ones you like and bring them forward. Make sense, mostly, kind of?
Yeah, I get it.
You have any questions, Sean?
Nope, understand it.
Okay, so I guess we're looking for a motion here. Is that right, Chris, on which methodology?
Consensus.
A consensus? Okay, so am I understanding that we're on the consensus that we're going to appoint 2 board members to bring forward our budget committee selections?
Correct.
I don't like the idea of publicly interviewing.
I know that opens an opportunity for embarrassment. We don't
Yeah,
want to do
I
that.
don't want to do that. So I'd go with option 2.
Okay.
That's what I would like.
I think we have a consensus.
Okay.
For me, I'm good being on it or not. So if,
Same.
okay. So Ryan, it sounds like
Well,
you,
I'd like to be on it, at least the
Okay.
first time.
And I've already done it, so,
okay, so you want
guys
to do it
can-
or not?
Sure.
Okay,
All right,
so
there
how
you
about
go.
you two do it?
do we need a motion for that?
So that was on the agenda for the December 11th meeting, is to appoint the two. Not that you couldn't do it tonight, but bring back the application and then you appoint the two board members that would be the people that would review it doesn't have to happen that way, it just,
Okay,
so you can appoint tonight if you'd like.
that's fine. So do we just make the appointment or do we make a board vote? Because they're kind of voting for themselves. And we don't have Roger here.
Yeah, maybe we should
I
do it in
would take it,
December.
I would take it back next.
Okay, then let's save it for another day and we'll bring it back on the next one then. Okay. Superintendent comments.
I'll keep them short tonight. We are currently going into Thanksgiving with a changed calendar this year for the first time. It is parent-teacher conferences. Happened to be in one building on Friday. Saw a lot of parents coming and going from Liberty Elementary. And looked really healthy, really looked great. I'll only really talk about two items tonight. We know that there is a strike going on in Portland and that about 70 districts approximately are in bargaining with contracts that expired this last summer. And so settlements seem to be rare at this time, but we hope that as the Portland strike moves somewhere towards a conclusion, that we would ultimately be able to move forward. We are bargaining right now. The teachers opened language last year. There are still some things that we're working on. We feel like those meetings have been great. They have been collegial. They have been collaborative. Lots of good thinking in that meeting, those series of meetings. We are set to meet again with teachers on November 27th, which is the Monday evening following the Thanksgiving break. I think that's from 4 to 6. And so we've been working on 3 or 4 things that we will bring to them at that time. We do know that we will have a full contract to bargain this coming year, this coming spring for next year. And so we will be working, obviously over the next 7 months to prepare as much as possible for that. And we want to do it with them, right? So we have agreed on several things that we will continue to work on together, high school schedules being one of them, and there will be other things as well. The classified bargaining, their contract expired on June 30th of this last summer, and so they have been without a contract. They have requested mediation, and we are set for mediation on December 11th. We'll be meeting with them with a mediator. That is a shuttle series of meetings where the mediator goes in one room and meets with one group, then takes a message across. I think both the union and the district agree that this is a positive step to have a third party in to try to help move that to a closure. And so we are just preparing for that at this time. So December 27th or November 27th with teachers. We will probably in all likelihood set even further meetings as we get ready for the bargaining in the spring. And then December 11th will be the classified date, and that will be mediation. That's all I have.
All right.
Sean, can you make that date, the 27th?
I can make that work, yeah.
Can you give me a little bit of context on the calendar? The conferences seem kind of late, and I know we tried this once years ago, and around us, they'd normally are earlier, so can you kind of walk me through that?
Yeah, so in the one hand, the contract calls for a calendar committee. And that was not done this last year. We did share the proposed calendar and had discussions about when conferences would be. We reached agreement with the people, the presidents, and perhaps it was circulated, I'm not sure to what level it was circulated, that we would try this methodology. We do intend with Susie Orsborn to run a full calendar committee and review that as we go forward this coming year.
And I'm not criticizing it, I just know we did this once and people thought it was too late and we got rid of it and now we're
Yeah.
back to it again, so I didn't know how that circled back.
Well, and I think as we pull together a full committee,
Okay,
we'll be able to surface those things and review what we want to do as we go forward.
okay, yeah, thanks.
All right, board member reports. Sean or Ryan?
Go ahead, Sean.
For me, it was just enlightening and heartening, like very encouraging to see. I'm talking about the academic all-stars and the recognition for those students. Both just seeing the light and the encouragement that they had for receiving some recognition, and just seeing the opportunity for them to be recognized in front of their peers was really encouraging for me, and how the looks on their faces, just that they seem so happy to be recognized for doing good work. And I really appreciated being a part of that. So thank you.
Yeah, I went to, Ken Gilbert hosted Pete on a tour of Memorial Middle School a couple weeks ago, which I really appreciated that. Saw a lot of great stuff going on there. It reminded me, their alt program looks good, but it reminded me that something we've had a problem in this district for a long time is we've got some pretty good systems supporting kids that really struggle in our middle school, and we do a pretty good job with our juniors and seniors in our AOS program, but we continue to sort of struggle a little with our 9th and 10th graders. There's not an easy solution for that. Those kids are, it's a unique population and it can be difficult to solve, but I always feel like there's a bit of a crater in our continuous supports right there, and it's something I think we just want to kind of keep thinking on and chewing on and seeing what we can do to sort of work on that. Another thing I did is went to a community event a couple weekends ago and around having students of underserved populations, how to feel included in school and how to be, what things that schools and school districts are doing to help those students. And saw a lot of really great presentations, a lot of great things that community groups are doing in our schools and in Corvallis schools as well around underserved populations and helping make sure kids are feeling included and like they belong.
Sure. I also went to All Stars. I think that's a great program. Thank you, Chris, and all the rest who made that happen. I think it's a great opportunity for us to celebrate our children's success and make a big deal of it. So I think that's neat, and I think our Albany Performance Auditorium is a great place to do that now. As Ryan said, I got an opportunity to go to a couple events. Actually, we went to the Lynn Benton Lincoln Weaving Wisdom Community Conversations. Lindsay, you and your crew were there, which was great. I thought that was really good. It was good to meet people. That's awesome. Also went to Memorial Middle School with Ryan, and we got to watch lunch in a couple classrooms. I think that was really good. Our schools, in my opinion, are really coming back out of COVID, which is fantastic. We're able to provide a better learning environment. I wouldn't say the behaviors are where we want them to be, nor is the ability for the kids to focus on what they need to catch up in learning. But it certainly has improved, and that's fantastic, and we need to keep it moving in that direction. Lots in the news right now about public education in the state of Oregon. As our superintendent talked about, Portland Public Schools has been on strike since October 31st, and they're not going to get back to school till November 27th. The state itself has a lot to figure out on how they're going to get school paid for, and all the districts are dealing with that at this point. And it's not just, Lebanon, it looks like they have a contract that they're about to approve, although I think you put out there that they got to vote on it still, right? So hopefully that'll happen. Not all districts are having problems, but some are. Salem-Keizer right now is having quite an issue as well. They've been spending their money kind of ahead of what they have, and so they've had a hiring freeze since the very beginning of the year. And they just recently announced they're going to, lay off 2 or 3, hundreds of people, right? Because they have a huge amount of money that they're underwater. And by the way, they're still going through union negotiations. Just ask for a mediator. So unfortunately, that's not a real good place to be. I'm very thankful that our district, we've kind of thought ahead of this. Thankful for the last couple years with Rob Saxton and Andy and Jane we've been putting more focus on the financials, and I think that's really important. Quite frankly, I didn't think we had as much accountability in that way in the past, and we really needed to. And I think because we've thought ahead of it, we're not going to have all the consequences that some other districts are going to have. And I think that's really important, and that's due to a lot of hard work by Jane mostly and others here at the district. So I think that's great. Another thing that is going on in Salem, if you listen to the news or watch it at all, unfortunately, they're having a lot of problems with student-caused injuries. You know, all last year, they had 386 reported, right? That's a lot. Now, they're a district much bigger than us, right? Just from the beginning of the school year till now, they've had 420.
Wow.
I mean, so these kids are having a lot of issues. They're having a hard time sitting still, et cetera, et cetera. But we in this district and all other districts, we need, student violence is unacceptable, right? I mean, it has no place in a school, and we need to provide our students as well as our staff a safe and productive environment. And I think that's something that we've been focusing on, and I'm really happy about that. Back in March, we had some ethics complaints put against those of us who were on the board at that time. One of them was for listing the wrong code to go into executive session. It was, and I might not have this 100% right, but it's very close. The code was like 6220.A. We listed it as point A. It was supposed to be point D, okay? I'll be the first to admit, I was the chair back then. I don't know what code we're supposed to do it under. I mean, even our lawyer thought it was supposed to be under D, so they have found, yes, you guys did that under the wrong code. We understand why. That's something that we've been doing at this district under that code for years. I mean, well before I was here. This is the first time it got pointed out that was incorrect. So all of us, Brad and I, received letters of education.
Correct.
So did Eric Agonada, and Michael Thompson got a $100 fine. Okay, the other, Roger Nyquist originally got ethics claims against him as well. He didn't even come to the meeting, so he was safe. Okay, so that went away.
That was dropped. Yeah.
That was dropped. The other ethics complaint was against myself for voting on a contract that involved my wife. She was one of 550 on the contract. The ethics committee decided to just dismiss that case. So these are all things you can go up on unfortunately, I know way more about this than I used to. You can go up on the Oregon's Ethics Commission and you can look up the disposition of these cases and what happens. So one thing I'd like to read. So moving forward, I think it's important for the board and all of us to understand the Ethics Commission will handle complaints differently in the future. Last year, the Oregon legislature passed HB 2805, which modified how the Ethics Commission handles complaints. Of note, now a complainant must first submit a written grievance to the public body where the alleged violation occurred and detail the circumstance of the alleged violation. This now has a 30-day window for that grievance to be filed. After that, we will have 21 days to respond to the grievance, to admit or deny the allegations. Only after these steps occur can a complainant then go to the Ethics Commission. I believe this process will be beneficial for boards and governing bodies throughout the state. Unfortunately, these complaints have become as much about possibly doing something wrong as it is just a vendetta. So that's all I have.
Did they give you any guidance about how to move forward with your wife as a teacher in terms of what you can vote on, what you can't, how that's supposed to work?
Yeah, and you're very important in this too. So the best, cleanest way to do it, and if I had thought of it, the best way to do is just not participate.
Okay.
To 1 of 520, the argument there is that's a class because we didn't talk about the fact that, she was on it at all or change her contract to any way, and so would be with your wife.
Okay.
But honestly, if I had abstained, it would have been 4-0 with one abstention. It wouldn't have changed a thing. Unfortunately, though, it was a big log packet, and I wasn't thinking about the fact that my wife was on it. But one thing that I would ask everyone to help me and Ryan think about is there's no reason for us to vote. There's no gain for us to vote. Let's just not vote. Right? That just makes no sense.
All right, appreciate it.
Right. Yep. So something else I learned about in the ethics letter of education is that no matter what staff tells us, the board is still responsible to go under the correct code. So we've been put in the position of becoming attorneys and having to figure out exactly what letter, and there's I think it's A through F, different ways that you can go into executive session. And so going forward, I mean, this rule change will help, but going forward, one of the things that I'm going to maybe investigate, and we'll talk about later, is having an attorney present. Because if an attorney tells you how to go into executive session, then it is their responsibility should we select the wrong subletter. So it's just something to keep in mind. I was unaware of that. And we routinely rely on staff, and I don't want staff to feel at all bad. We all got surprised by this. It was just something that nobody saw coming. And so no hard feelings, but going forward, I want to protect the board to the best of our ability so that we don't have to do this, because it hasn't been a real good time.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please.
So first of all, I want to acknowledge, but I also want to point out that that original complaint was filed because the names that were eventually acted on that night and that were going into executive session were not posted prior to the meeting. And we had been informed that it was appropriate, since it was an executive session, to not post that prior. It was, when the complaint was filed, a subsequent review of all pieces of information then showed that the number was different. And so that is how we arrived at that letter of instruction. But that was not the original complaint, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I want to acknowledge, I believe for 12 years in my prior district, we went under that same code, and we did it here, and I think it had happened here, so.
Yeah, it seems to be widely common practice,
Yeah,
so,
which
but
is-
unfortunately, it's written in a very hard to understand manner.
Yes, but just want to acknowledge that.
And like I said, our lawyer has been here on that executive session forever, for years, and he wasn't giving us the wrong thing. You know, the reality is everyone at the pre-board meetings, everyone at the table, if we have an issue with something going wrong, just speak up. We'll do it different. We want to do it right. You know, using 6220A by 6220D was not something we intended to do or knew better.
And just one more comment. I think Sean's comment about the recognition of students is really important, but it is also really important and much appreciated that all 5 board members have been at every one of those. And I think that also says a really strong message. So thank you guys for
Oh,
coming.
it's why we're doing this. I mean, that's right. Like Sean said, it's the fun part.
Exactly. That's the fun part. Being online, listening to ethics board, not so much. This is the stuff that's fun, to celebrate kids and their successes, right? That's what everyone wants to do.
Yeah, that's why we're doing this. It's not for the fun of the meetings, although it's a great time, but Hadley, take us to somewhere fun, would you?
Okay, so at West, the Environmental Club did a trip to the Museum of Cultural and Natural History in Eugene. The Latin Club has started this year to continue Latin for students due to Latin 3 and 4 not being offered this year. Cozy Crafts happens in the library, and I believe the last craft they made was were friendship bracelets. A new club/program has started. There was an informational meeting for anyone interested in programming, game design, art, and storytelling to design a video game and compete with friends in the Oregon Game Project Challenge. Flash had their regular 2 meetings this past week, one to prepare and see the presentation, and then again on Thursday and Friday to see the freshmen. The presentation was short, but each class got to do a Thanksgiving trivia-inspired Kahoot. National Honor Society induction will be on the 28th for this year's juniors. Philosophy, Latinx, Youth and Government, Model UN, and ASL are clubs that regularly have meetings. Water polo had a pretty exciting weekend last week where boys took first in state and girls second in state. I'm very proud of both teams. I went and saw them, and they played extremely hard. The High Steppers dance team had their first competition of the season in Gladstone this weekend. Basketball has started practices every day after school, and their first game is in December. Wrestling also started, although people can still join if interested, with practices right after school. The food drive this year brought in a lot of last-second items. I was very pleased with how well all of the classes stepped up to bring in food. Happy to say that although all classes were very close, seniors did win. All donations go directly to West families in need. I also know that leading up, class and ASB officers did good work initiating people to bring in food, and leadership spent a lot of time counting all the food and getting it ready for the families. Winter Talent Show registration forms were due this past week, and the performance is on the December 15th. Spring musical auditions for the Addams Family are on November 28th, 29th, and 30th after school. Band got their Winter at West music last week and have been practicing. Also got ready for the OSU and U of O fight songs. They performed them for Liberty. For the Veterans Day Parade on the 11th, West Albany Marching Band, Cheer Team, and High Steppers were all there, part of the parade to help honor our veterans. Conferences were today and will be tomorrow morning. Students and their families get to meet with their teachers. I know my parents always look forward to conferences, however, I do not. There has been a lot of college outreach recently. There have been people from LBCC here to help and answer questions, as well as seniors who have applied to a college, a branch of the military, or an apprenticeship program can have a certificate made and displayed in the College and Career Center to celebrate their success. And also a little unrelated to West, but Albany Pride had held their second coffee hour at Starbucks, where anyone can drop in and have coffee and pastries and meet with one another. One woman, Gail, and I don't have her last name with me at the moment, was there to pass out information on free HIV and other STI testing, along with information on fentanyl, and had Narcan for everyone to take. I think it's always good to see programs like this pop up, and I hope that more of the community hear about these meetings, as they are very important information and resources to take home.
Outstanding. Thanks, Headley. Okay. I can do that in new business. So let's go ahead and go to personnel licensed. Looking for a motion?
Well,
Go ahead.
comment. If we could, I notice on these, and Susie, I know we've talked about this. Can we have the, so what I'm looking for, and this is something we had on it before and somehow it went away, okay? The idea that we're hiring 10 certified means nothing to me unless I have a, how many do we have overall? How many are leaving? How many are going? How many open spots we have? So if we could include that on there,
And I talked to Lori, and she's gonna do that. She just didn't have the time to do it for this time.
okay. All right, thank you.
All right, gentlemen, seeking a motion on this
Does
one.
the law requires us to approve leaves? I didn't know that. Like, this is just a leave, that's all this is.
I don't think this, I
What if I
don't
said
think
no?
we have to approve it.
I mean,
I don't know.
I don't,
weird to approve a
I don't
leave.
see any harm. Let's get on it.
yeah, but, I mean, I don't know anything about it. Why would I be? Sure. Okay, whatever. I'm not making.
I move to approve licensed as shown.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Personnel classified.
I move to approve classified as shown.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, approval of the minutes from October 23rd. Looking for a motion to approve those minutes.
Move to approve the amendments from 10:23 as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now we go to I-4, which is a memorandum of understanding. Can we get a little background on this, I think?
Yeah, this is language, it has been present in an MOU prior years. It is a release of the president. This district is large enough that the union is able to fund full release of its president to represent during the day. And this would be something that we would probably move into a contract as well when we end up doing that.
This isn't different. This is current practice.
I'm not aware that we changed that in any way, that we're just rolling it forward and up.
It just requires approval periodically.
Yeah.
And one of the things that happens is if they lose their position, they have rights to come back into the
To a
district, correct?
position.
And past president is now at South, I believe.
Yes. The other thing, we have instituted the practice that when we develop an MOU, that we are going to come to the board and have it ratified, and it will be in the board record so that we can track them. We've had a lot of MOUs. Some of that was related to COVID, to being able to get people together, rapidly changing conditions. But now as we move forward, when we have an MOU, we will bring it to the board before it's signed and becomes valid.
Right. Well, I guess I don't understand. I mean, I don't care, but I don't on this one, but it's kind of a housekeeping MOU. Why are we doing it right now? Like, why not in the regular contract cycle? Why is it an MOU that's coming up in November of right now?
So it was written to expire I think it was a
Oh.
1 year. And so as it expired, just to keep it.
Those has a
going
weird
until-
expiration date that doesn't match the contract.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So to be clear, we're modifying an existing contract. And I bring that up because there's been some discussion in the paper and otherwise that the teachers don't have a contract. But we can't modify something that doesn't exist.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, Susie, this has not been in the contract. It had been a MOU previous that just needed to be updated.
So we're adding this to the contract that is in existence. I'm just making it clear that we have a contract with our teachers currently.
It will expire in June.
Yes,
We
it will.
bargain then.
Yes,
And
and we're gonna
hopefully in
bargain
that
again, yes.
bargaining, then we can take some of these that have been existing for a long time.
And
that we
incorporate
can
them.
Bring them in.
Correct, okay.
I move we approve the MOU as.
I'll second.
Favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, there's another MOU below it. Has to do with the sick leave bank. And I was part of the discussions when this got brought up. And I remember Jane and I talked about this and thought it was a great idea. And I think the teachers really were excited that the district was willing to do this. And maybe, Jane, you could talk a little more about it, or if you want Andy to, or about what it is. Or Susie, yeah.
How we changed it. We just updated the sick leave bank. They've always had it, but they wanted to, they wanted to up the hours in the sick leave bank. I want to say, if I remember, 350? Do you remember? Yes. To 350, and it had been lower before, but they wanted to keep 350 hours in.
And I think there's also some adjustments on how they can contribute. They didn't have to give up
They don't have to give
a
up their
personal,
personal days.
a personal day, right? Yeah, I think that was
They
some of the
used to
changes.
have to use their personal days or give up their personal days, but now they just can use their sick time and donate it to a member in need.
That's a real positive change. I like that.
I have a couple questions. So it is, where, at one point in here, it says the additional 300 hours. Is that something that would be additional donations of up to 300 hours? Or is that an additional, where does that additional 300 come from?
They wanna keep that much in their bank so that they could.
It is taken from individual sick leave that they have.
Correct. So they have an original bank they can expend up to 500 hours, but then it says they can petition or they can ask for an increase of an additional 300 hours. So for 800 total. So I was wondering where that additional 300 comes from. That's just, they would ask for more donations to get the 300? Okay.
Exactly.
And then do you have to be, is this all part of the union? You have to be in the union to donate and you have to be in the union to receive?
I don't know that that's the case, because all people are under the conditions of the contract.
I was gonna say,
Right.
yeah.
And I
they
think it's
can
those who donate,
even if they're not in
yeah.
the union.
So then I guess going off of that, there's the select committee that determines who receives the hours. How are they elected to that? Or are they just appointed? What's the process look like of who gets to decide who gets the hours?
I would say it'd be the governing body of the
I
union.
believe it's the governing body, and it's not the bargaining committee, there is a separate leadership group.
Right.
The 300, though, the request would come from usage, so it generally is, like we would say up to this number. They can go out and ask again by agreement if their number begins to drop. If we went into, say, another Omicron thing where a lot of sick time or several people were experiencing a long leave, then that is the condition under which they would ask for a recharging of that number. But they wouldn't just immediately come in and say, hey, we have 500, we need another 3. They would make that request after usage, like if it was
Yeah.
being drawn down. So it really is just increasing so that we wouldn't have to go back and recharge it all the time if there was a period of high use.
Gotcha. I guess where my thought process is going with the select committee is if it's not solely for people that are in the union, it's everybody under the contract. And if the union gets to decide who is put in charge of the committee, how they get to expend it, if that could be seen as someone like, oh, if you're not a part of the union, we can't give you this. Or if I don't know what the transparency level looks like. So I'm just trying to see if I donate my sick time.
Anybody that's not in the union still follows the contract.
Correct. But then if the people that are put in charge of be in the committee to dole out who gets it. If it's only the people that are in the union, then the union people are deciding what to do with everybody's donations.
I don't think that would happen. I don't feel like that would happen because it's really extenuating circumstances that happen to a person. I mean, I've not known people to ask for sick days unless it's a pretty serious event. And that's just in my time in the district. So I've never heard of that.
I was just asking.
Yeah.
I think that this union, the union in my past district, really acted responsibly in this manner. They have criteria in here that say that it has to be a serious. And so I don't think they have any leeway either, because these are the conditions that they operate on, that they could not be, what would the word be, arbitrary or capricious or pick one or the other or use it as a recruiting tool. I think that they have been very circumspect in how it's been delivered to people.
I agree.
And just to be a little bit clear, so before someone can utilize the sick leave bank, they would have exhausted their own personal sick leave?
Correct.
Yeah, and so this is just a measure to keep them without financial hardship
So like,
during time of illness.
example would be that someone's going through cancer treatment and they have to do chemotherapy and then do radiation, and they've used all their sick time, they can ask for some sick days to be donated. And usually, people have been more than willing to donate sick days to people in need.
Sure.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other discussion? You had a comment, Kelsey? No? Okay. Looking for a motion.
Move we approve as written.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, updated budget resolution. Ms. Jane, do you want to tell us about this?
Yes, this doesn't change any of the totals or the dollar amounts from the resolution that the board approved during the budget. It's in the debt service. ODE is asking me to clarify, I had asked you to appropriate it at the 5,000 level, and they want it specified between the actual debt service payment and the transfer for debt service. So under the 300 debt service fund, I separated out that 600,000. So that's the only change. And we don't have to change resolution numbers or anything. I just had to write revised at the top.
Anyone have any questions? No questions? Seeking a motion, please.
I move we approve the updated 23-24 budget resolution as presented.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, moving on to K1, bias incident reporting update. Yay.
I think Emily's getting it.
Kelsey, are you planning to introduce Ethan?
Yep.
Okay.
Might need your help. Technical difficulties. I appreciate y'all. I was also just gonna say thank you for approving the sick leave. That's something that I benefited from when I had cancer
well,
in a
just-
previous place, so.
Yeah, it just made so much sense to me when we were doing that.
I guess I was under the impression that it was just gonna be in here. You're great. Cool. Yep. From the board packet. Awesome.
I saw light.
Okay. So, first of all, super grateful to get the chance to chat with you folks about what's happening and give you a brief overview of all the work Ethan and I have been doing. Oh, towards me? Okay. I was able to speak to Brian and Pete briefly at the Open Coalition that they came to, but excited to chat with you. And first and foremost, I wanted to introduce my right-hand man, Ethan Swain. this work is so important and so it's a huge task, and I couldn't do it without him, and super grateful. So wanted him to get a shout out for that first. Before I get into some of the bias incident data, I just wanted to give a brief overview of the work that our team is doing related to the strategic plan, specifically the equitable outcomes. So in terms of the first objective, we've been working closely with HR to evolve hiring practices previously and look forward to working on that more. We've also been partnering with LBCC to co-facilitate employee affinity spaces, which is known to increase retention specifically for marginalized and POC BIPOC staff. There will also be an affinity space for white staff who are looking for a way to be involved in allyship or just better understanding the ways that they can support marginalized staff or just their own journey with that. And then we'll also be looking to do a search advocate training with LBCC to better understand our hiring practices and how we can bring that info back to share with Susie and HR and other admin team to figure out what we can do to diversify our staff and get our numbers matching the populations of students who need more equitable support. Then in terms of objective 2, we continue to do trainings monthly with our admin, but have also done a couple of one-on-one trainings at schools on restorative practice and then on implicit bias and interrupting bias. I gave y'all also an example of some of the scenarios that we have admin working through and questions that we have them considering that better serves them as they are practicing these situations in real time. And then we've also spent about 90% of our time probably engaging staff, teachers, admin, one-on-one in direct response to bias incidents. So when something is happening and they're needing support, having conversation around what occurred, what conversations can look like with family, and then we also do a wraparound service, often speaking with families whose students have experienced harm, as well as students who've experienced harm, and modeled a reentry process, maybe figuring out what it would look like for that student to feel safe in their school again, et cetera, after an incident, maybe bringing students together to have a restorative conversation. And then we've also been continuously updating our internal protocol and frequently getting updates directly from staff because they're the ones who are using it in real time. And it's important for Ethan and I to know what that looks like for staff. And we've tweaked and updated it per recommendation from staff directly and then continue to update them on those procedures as we make those changes. So you'll see that most recently it was updated October 25th. I imagine, but by the end of the school year, we'll have undergone multiple. We just really want this to be a tool that staff feel confident in using and feel supported by us, the EDI team, in using that. And then lastly, we've been working with our levels directors and administrators to offer that increased support that I briefly spoke to just now, as well as affinity spaces, especially at the middle school level. That's new for us this year. We find that that is particularly important for our marginalized youth who are seeking a safe space on campus that maybe hasn't historically been there. We look forward to starting some family forums and listening sessions as well to hear directly from families and the ways in which the EDI team can be supporting belonging or interruption of bias and support after bias for their kiddos. And then this should say school improvement plan, and I apologize. We have been graciously invited by levels directors to be a part of school improvement plans so that we're hearing directly as well from high school and middle schools on what students need more equitable support, and that has impacted our work as well and how we can support staff and students alike and working collaboratively with our levels directors to push things forward and move the dial. So, yeah. So I would love now to just share some data with you. And so you're aware, last year, I think the report outs that we got were about 34 throughout the entire year. And that was a different system. We have updated the ways that we're tracking, and we will, I'll share that with you in a minute. So this number might seem high, right? But please know that these numbers existed previously as well, but we've just updated our tracking system to better reflect what's happening. And I continue to tell my staff that I work with to not be afraid of high numbers, because it means that we're working on a system to better understand what's going on, and that we can't address those situations if we don't have accurate numbers, and that if we're not hearing directly from them, we can't support them. If you look at this data, you'll see that based on developmental and age groups, that it's not surprising middle schoolers and upper elementary students are struggling with some behaviors or bias incidents. And if you look at this next piece, however, I appreciate the question around this. To be clear, when we look at offenders, this was just our way of showing that while we have high numbers of incidents, we have low numbers of students re-offending or continuing to cause harm to their peers. So what that tells us is that while the numbers are high, what we're doing to mitigate it and interrupt it is working. So the protocols and the support to staff and the conversations with students seems to have an impact on their ability to understand how they're causing harm to their peers. And we know that no matter what, some students are always going to struggle with that, but we're working to support students directly and teachers, staff, to arm them with appropriate wording and protocols to feel confident and interrupt it each time. With that in mind, this is the first page of our internal protocol, which I've shared with y'all. And I just wanted to highlight that our expectation from the EDI team is to confidently and consistently interrupt incidences related to bias that disrupt a safe and respectful environment, to ensure accountability and responsibility for the use of appropriate language and behavior. And I don't take that statement lightly, and for that reason, continue to support staff as they're working this protocol. I don't find it fair to ask people things and not support them in their utilization of a protocol. So, and for folks that aren't looking at this bias protocol, the way that we have that broken down is by level of offense, 1, 2, and 3, and then a definition of what the behavior would look like in each category. And then we offer staff some verbiage on what their response could look like, as well as what next steps should look like in terms of who they're contacting, which then shoots you over to the family communication on both ends, kiddo who's experiencing harm, kiddo who is causing harm, a section on restorative practice, and then how my team will support family, staff, students in each incident that occurs. And let's see, just to give you an update on other ways that we're supporting the interruption of bias in our schools. So last year we had a bias incident protocol. We've really shifted it to something that works well for us, that we created ourselves. We've changed the ways in which we're tracking. Historically, it was done through a Google form, and we heard feedback that that was a little bit challenging, especially during a busy day for teachers. So we're fortunate to have an internal tracking system with wonderful staff that help me look at the data. And with that data, we're actually reviewing it bi-weekly as well as monthly with levels directors, so that we have a good understanding of what students are continuing to cause harm and which students are continuing to experience harm, so that we can support them equitably, offer them more support, as well as better ways to interact with their peers if that's something that they're needing. And I've spoken a little bit to the ways in which we've been supporting and BIR responses to staff, students, family, the creation of affinity spaces, which also allow students a safe space to exist and share what they're experiencing in a safe environment, which we then share back when applicable to admin at each school. And we're hearing directly from them what it would mean to have safe space on their campuses. We're also continuing to do staff trainings and really implementing restorative practice this year, which I know Darren will be speaking to you all more about in next month. And just overall trying to offer more student support and familial support, which is also coupled with giving support to our staff and teachers and protocols and whatever it is that they need in regards to bias. So, yeah. I'm sure there's questions and I'd love to answer some.
Do if you don't. Okay, since somebody's jumping in here, I will. Back to the slide, which offenders and number of offenses.
Yeah,
Had some questions on that.
Of course.
So you've got the blue number 1 and 47.
Yeah.
Does that mean that one student committed 47 offenses or 47 students committed one offense?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
the second way.
Yes, and then the
Okay.
orange is a very small number of students who have continued to struggle with corrective behavior, and we're watching that and offering them direct support, which has also looked like Ethan and I will be creating materials to send home for families as well, so that they can support further education at home outside of the school if
So
they're
the
struggling.
orange number, just so I'm clear, is they committed more than one offense.
Yes,
And that would be 5 students committed more than one offense. Is that how I'm reading that?
I think, yes. Yep.
In that particular, I'm just using the middle one because it was, yeah, just to understand. And I do want to applaud you. Yeah, it's, the fear is not large numbers.
Of course.
When we had the 34 number, we were a little dubious. It's hard to believe that out of 9,000 students, rough number, we only had 34.
Right.
No. And even these numbers, I think you would think are low.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so you're doing the exact right thing. We got to identify the problem so then we can start to form solutions and start to correct it. So don't be afraid of big numbers. Just be accurate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You bet.
Sure. First off, I want to say thanks to you and Ethan for getting out in the schools. I hear back from them all the time how excited they are to have you out there. That is not something that was happening in the past, and I think it's very important for you to get out there and kind of spread the word and the love and help them. This is tough stuff. The other thing that I would really say, I love the fact that we are doing restorative justice in what I think the manner it's supposed to be used. Restorative justice doesn't mean you can keep making the same mistake over and over again and just be told, hey, that makes Johnny feel bad, you should stop that. The reality is some students, kids, adults just don't hear that, right? They hear, I didn't get in trouble, I liked doing that, I'm gonna do it again. And I think unfortunately we had some bias incidents occurring over and over again because we weren't holding those kids accountable when they made the same mistake over and over again. You can't do certain things in our society over and over again and not have consequences, So I very much appreciate that we are moving forward to that. So thank you very much for your work. I enjoyed hanging out with you that Saturday afternoon. It was entertaining.
Thank you, Pete.
Right, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of follow you guys with what you guys said. Don't be afraid of big numbers. I agree. I think those numbers are low. I heard once 100% of our students of color have experienced bias incidents in our schools, so those numbers are clearly not reflected in the data. So we just need to keep getting at that so we can solve that because it's not acceptable. I did have a question earlier. You were talking about the ways that you engage with the district. Do you have any kind of a committee or steering committee of people that like teachers and principals maybe get together once a month and sort of it's as a feedback loop, like this is what's happening, this is what we're seeing, this is what we're trying to do about it, where you can sort of get that sounding board in a small environment?
That's a great question. It's something we've definitely talked about, creating an equity task force. I think at this point, it's the two of us, and our number one goal right now is applying pressure where there's problems. And so while that's something I look forward to doing maybe next year, ultimately we've been trying to do as much one-on-one support as possible. We do get feedback after ALTs, after any of our trainings. We offer specific questions that allows us to better understand how we can improve what we're doing. And then when we go back to those spaces, we share back what we heard and adjust based on that feedback. But I absolutely do think that it would be important to have an equity task force with multiple folks. That'll just makes us better. So
Good, yeah, I would just tell you from experience with 22 schools, it's really hard to get your ear on the ground. And so,
100%.
you know, you gotta really control your feedback loops that you're getting more than one information source in terms of making decisions, educating people. It's
absolutely, yeah. And I think with capacity growth, that is something we would absolutely do. Yeah.
okay, cool.
So, and Kelsey, do you want to talk just a little bit about the law that we will be creating
Yes.
an equity committee, which will eventually have a member on the budget committee? I can't remember the
Yeah,
year.
so it's District Equity Coalition or Committee, I believe the DEC is what it will be called. And I hope to share more info with you as we get more and it gets closer to the time to start implementing that, but it would include community members, it would include staff, teachers, families, student board members, et cetera, where we would be reviewing policies, procedures. It's an ODE guideline coming in the coming year. So that will be a really wonderful opportunity for us to be working collaboratively and making equitable decisions for all the folks that our decisions impact.
Go ahead.
I think it's important work. I think we've shown how much we think it's important because we're not required to have your position, and we have your position, right? And we believe in having your position, and we're paying your position, plus Ethan and others. It's important work, you know. So if you need people to help you out, please feel like you can get that. You know, you need to know you have that support, and I'm sure you do. I know it's in our top 3, right?
Thank you. Yeah.
Just a couple of other comments. I think you're right, Pete. The presence that these two have had in buildings with
been
people has
fantastic.
been really catalytic. But I also want to recognize as well Stafford Boyd and Sue. Stafford is very much leaning into this, is supportive, and he is also present at schools and supporting them as they do this work. And just wanted to make sure that people understood that as well. But these two are driving it, and they're doing great work. And the other day at the regional meeting, people were very interested to see the template and the ongoing work that is being done here. So I was very proud of Kelsey and Ethan for their work in this.
Thank you. Yeah. And when I say levels directors, I mean Sue and Stafford, and Andy's exactly right. We couldn't be in those schools and making changes without space made to have these conversations. So very grateful for that.
Kelsey, as part of your matrix that you're building, do you have any consequences matrix built in so that you kind of understand the levels of punishment? Is it when you have the repeat offenders, right? If you keep saying, no, you can't do that, and they still do it, there's got to be some escalation of consequences. And so has that thought process started?
I would say that's something that's not necessarily within my realm. I don't do so much the consequences piece, but I absolutely do work collaboratively with folks who are in that decision making, and we're certainly leaning into the restorative piece, which isn't to avoid consequence. It's just to offer opportunities to engage and grow and learn and be invited back into a joint community. But I mean, this isn't without consequence by all means.
Well, certain consequences can be any number of things, right? There's a whole list of them, but the whole goal is to change behavior.
Absolutely.
And so at some point in time, there just needs, and I don't know that the board's the one to select the consequence, and we are not. But I just want to know if there's thought given to kind of a series of consequences or things. If you have a repeat offender, how are we going to try to change that behavior?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question, and I think I've been working with folks to figure out what types of communication goes home to families when their students are causing harm, which leads into creating materials to further the conversation when they're at home as well, because we recognize that hearing from a principal or from a complete stranger coming into their space and telling them how they're causing harm isn't enough, right? We need to continue that conversation, and students learn in school, but they also learn from their family and from friends and peers. And so getting in front of students as well to engage in more trainings about what it looks like to be an appropriate peer to one another, really trying to lean into the fact that your school space, your classroom is a community, you're valued and loved, and we want you to be here, and this is what it takes to be a part of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, just hoping there's some thought process on, what we have to do if we can't get, because the way I read this chart, 47 students only offended one time. There was a minor correction, they didn't reoffend, right? And so that's great, but the other 5, we have to do a little more work.
Absolutely, yeah. And I don't think that's lost on us. I think we're figuring
No,
out what that looks
I
like.
I agree, yeah,
Yeah.
just checking the process. That's it.
100%. Look forward to sharing more about that in the future.
Thank you, Kelsey.
Yeah.
I gotta get back to where I was. There we go. Nope. Business report. Hang on, I got a small computer issue here I gotta get back to. Okay, there we go. Report cards and state test scores.
We have Stafford and Sue
Wonderful.
in the audience, and they'll take you through that. And this is not just a revamping, but also I think a little bit of a preview of some of the things you'll be looking at when principals are sharing through the year.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having Sue and I. We're excited to be here. Our goal with tonight's presentation is to share information so that you better understand the systems for publicized outcome-based K-12 academic improvement plans that we have here in the district, and those include goals, strategy, and timelines for reaching those goals. In short, we really want to give you a framework to better understand how our students are doing, what we're doing to do better for our students when we share our progress with you. And hopefully you'll start to see some coherence in how we're doing that over the year moving forward from here. So regular progress reports to you all and the public have been scheduled and include district academic progress reports from Sue and I at our next meeting in December, in March, and in June. School reports will begin in December at our next meeting, so you'll get those to a meeting, mostly at every meeting from here to the end of the school year. Also, Dave in the October 23rd meeting shared an integrated guidance update with y'all, and our district integrated guidance includes the student investment account, which is adding required performance targets this year as part of what's required for state accountability. And as you know, the student investment account eventually requires your approval, not only for the budget, but for the plan and now these added goals. So we're going to share a little bit with you about that tonight. And that next integrated guidance board report is scheduled for January 22nd. So to kick us off, all of our achievement plans begin with data reported through our state accountability systems, specifically our district state report cards. So that's where we'll start. We included in your packet the at-a-glance profile of this year's state report card, which was publicly released in late October.
So one of the things that we have, we're going to show you a snapshot of what, oh, I'm sorry. One of the things we're going to show you is a snapshot of what you'll see in the at-a-glance report. And there, when you're looking at at-a-glance, you can see there's one for the state, one for each district, and then one for each school. So you can see all levels of at-a-glance, and this is our district one. Starts with student population, and then on the you'll see percentage of groups with, like, we have 15% of our students with disabilities. 36% are on free and reduced lunch. So when you see that for a school, you'll see their specific population. If you look at the chart in the middle, what that one is telling us is what does our staff racial makeup look like compared to our student makeup. So for example, if you look at our Hispanic Latino students, we have 24% of our students are Latino, Hispanic, but only 8% of our teachers are. So on our strategic plan, when we looked at our data in our strategic plan, one of our goals is for human resources and principals, as we're hiring, to look for a more diverse teaching community and staff community. So we connect our strategic plan with our data in the state report cards too. So this is right here is our at-a-glance, and it's going to show you this first page. You'll see regular attenders, third grade language arts, math for eighth graders, on track to graduate, on time to graduate, and 5-year completion. It'll tell you the percentage that have passed, the average, and if we've gone up or down. So we're going to look at that. And this one is regular attenders. When they talk about regular attenders on the state report card, that is a student who's been at school 90% of the time or more. So if you look at this chart for any student that identifies as American Indian Alaskan Native, 61% of those students have been at school 90% of the time or more. So if you take a second to look down that chart, you'll see attendance is an area where we can improve. And each school has, we have different, we'll talk about that at each school and later on, but this is a pretty important one. And 90% of the year doesn't, 10 days and you've missed too much, so.
And then also, as you notice on the at-a-glance profile, each of those first metrics, those 6 metrics on the front page, have detailed information about each of these student groups listed. So this is really just showing you an example of that. For each of those high-level metrics, the information from the state will be across these student groups. Our state accountability, our report cards also include detail reports. And this is really where the meat is of what we do. We can really do something with this information. And this report gives us 3 types of information. First, academic achievement measures. They include English language arts and math achievement, grades 3 through 8 and 11, as measured by our Oregon State assessments. Regular attenders, as Sue mentioned, on track to English language proficiency for those students whose first language is not English. Students completing the 9th grade with sufficient credits to be on track for on-time graduation. Students graduating within 4 years of beginning high school, and then students completing a high school diploma or equivalency within 5 years of beginning high school. These accountability detail reports also include information on change for individual students over multiple years, referred to as growth, in English language arts and math. So students that take the test in multiple years will have a growth measure for them. And finally, these reports also detail participation rates for state assessments in English language arts and math. We had planned to include these in the board packet to support our presentation. And typically they're released with the at-a-glance profile in late October. But currently, our State Department of Education is still in negotiation with the Federal Department of Education because federal legislation has changed of what we have to do accountability. So we pitched a plan to them as a state. The federal government gave us feedback, and so it's in negotiations. And it's these metrics on these accountability details report that make that accountability system run. So those should be public any day now, and we'll definitely get them to you when they're released. But we wanted to let you know that those have not been released. But it's still important for us because at the local, especially school level, these are this information is what drives our plans. So wanted to just review those. Here's an example. This is just a kind of a screenshot of an example. So achievement reports, if you notice, this is an English language arts achievement report for middle school, the middle school level. And if you notice in the top right-hand corner, there's 5 colors, 5 levels, and they're color-coded. That's really important. The level 3, so green and blue, we want thumbs up. That's thumbs up for us. Yellow and orange starts to indicate we probably have some work to do. So level 3 is the state average established in the 2016-17 school year. That's the cut score, 54% of students in middle school achieving at proficient or above in 2016-17. That's the year that a lot of those cuts were established. So that's a good indicator. Again, green or blue, state average or above, again, in comparison to 16-17. 80 is the statewide goal. That's where the state wants to be in 2027. All right, level 4 is halfway between 3 and 5. Level 1 is the bottom 10% of schools for this school year. All right, and then level 2 is the cut for the top 90% up to that level 3 year. So and then you can see those student groups for each of these metrics on that. This is where this becomes really actionable because it shows us not just all students, but each of these student groups how we're doing. All right, so again, so if I just started to take a look at this, I would start to see yellow and orange, and start to think, this might be an area we need to focus on. All right? It's important though, if you look at the change, same group of students, same level, green and blue. So this is indicating even though the achievement is down in the level 1, level 2 area, the change, the growth seems to be better than average. So this is actually, hey, this is indicating we're doing good work at middle school in language arts. That's the starting point, right? I want you to the change though metrics were recalibrated after COVID. So if you look at level 3, the state average is 19% less, right? It's this average score change for our average student in our district compared to proficiency. And if you think about that, the notion of learning loss, so right now for our state accountability, the state average is a gap change of 19. All right, now the state goal is positive 5, that level 5. At some point, the state may recalibrate that, but right now that is the reality. So if you look at, so what this might indicate with level, on a change report, is that at the middle school level, particularly for economically disadvantaged kids, we are bucking the trend of learning loss. That's what those change reports kind of indicate for us, or not, right? If we are yellow or orange or yellow. So that's the change reports. And then finally, we have participation, really simple. If we don't have 94.5% of kids taking an assessment, it becomes really hard to make viable decisions about it. And the further you get from that 94.5%, the less valuable this becomes, especially comparing year to year. All right, so if you see, we almost met that last year. Our 2-year average is lower. So the 21-22 with all students, you can see 90.9. We increased by 4 percentage points. Great. That exceeds that 94.5, but our 2-year average, which is what our current accountability system is based upon, says we're not meeting that. So those are the 3 types of reports that you will see in those. And so I'm going to turn it over to Sue to tell us what this year's, luckily we get a preview before they're public, so we know that they're indicating some things, and Andy's already shared this publicly, but I'll let Sue share.
So this year, some of our points of pride were our 4-year graduation rate, our 5-year high school completion rate, middle school and high school language arts, middle school change in language arts, especially with our economically disadvantaged students, and middle school math change with both our economically disadvantaged students and our students with disability, which is amazing. And our points for priority, our priority work this year, we'll look at 9th grade on track for graduation, 3rd grade language arts, our regular attenders, which you saw earlier, and math in general. It's yours. Okay.
Great, so in terms of our district improvement plan, I mentioned as part of our student investment account, we are now, we are required this year to identify longitudinal performance growth targets. That's what they're called. As part of our student investment account and integrated guidance submissions to the state. Again, ODE has to approve these performance growth targets. We have submitted them already, and eventually the board, you all will have to approve them as part of integrated guidance. And there's 5 metrics that are required, and we have to create for each of those metrics 5-year targets, and we have to create 3 targets for each of those 5. All right? We have to create a baseline target, and which is, again, you can see there is what do we think realistically we can achieve, minimally. A stretch target, which is if everything went really well, how far do we think we could get? And then finally, a gap closing target is for marginalized focal student groups. What is it going to take for us to close the gap between those students and all students? So those focal group students, here's a list. It is almost inclusive of all the student groups listed on our state report cards. It includes a few others. So when we say focal student groups, it is this large inclusive list. For our longitudinal targets, it's any student that has any of these identity markers. So that's an important piece, and we're going to give you some examples here, but we have to start with where we've been. Here's the high level, here's the high level trend data for these 5 metrics that are required to establish long-term goals. You can see we started with 16, 17. That's when most of those cut scores were established that are on the accountability detail reports. I want you can notice some impact of COVID on some metrics, particularly over the last 3 or 4 years. I first want to point out the 4-year graduation and 9th grade on track is started. Those both kind of indicate some bounce back from COVID. The 5th-year completers, you can see like the cohorts of the kids. So the kids in 21, 22 on our state report card, they're at 80%. So 9% more of those kids got their certificate, if you can see, in 22, 23. So we're expecting, again, a similar bounce back, because that 84% we'd expect to get higher than that 89%. 3rd grade language arts, you can notice there's the 29-20, we didn't take the test. 20-21, very few kids took the test, so they're not even reporting our scores. And as we've gotten back above 90% participation, we're having more viable scores to compare. And then regular attenders, you can see the dip from COVID, which is a statewide, nationwide trend. So that's the big high-level data of where we've been. This is what we use to establish our targets, where we've been. So, also on this slide, there is a link to the ODE website where all annual school and district profiles can be found all the time, historical, back years. So this is our 4-year graduation longitudinal growth target. It is what we've submitted to ODE for approval, and if we get approval, this is what we would recommend to you. We may have to adjust this based upon feedback from ODE, but let me talk you through this a little bit to explain the 3 goals. If you look, the starting place for our goal setting is 84.4%. That's based upon where we've been. Our baseline goal, again, this minimum level of realistic goal for all students, the target is to get 90% of kids graduating on time in our district in 5 years. All right? For our focal groups, their starting place is 78.1% based upon where we've been. And our goal is to catch those groups of students up to 90% in 5 years. That's the red line. So then finally is if things went really well and we were really doing good things for kids, 95% of kids graduating in 4 years. So that's our stretch goal. Again, these are the goals, and then you can see if we progressed in a linear fashion, again, you can see what our goal for this year would be. And then each year, based upon how we do, we'll iterate the goal towards this. So the 5-year goals, once they're approved, will not change. And our new state accountability system, once they're agreed upon from the state and the feds, will kick in after 24-25. So in the fall of 2025, the state will have guidance and support. Primarily, that targets student schools and districts that fall in that level 1 category. That's the driver for our state accountability guidance and support in response to metrics at the state level. Similarly, switching to 5-year completion, again, if our current starting place is 88.9 for all students, our goal we're recommending is 95% of our students are completing in 5 years, and that's by 27, 28. You can see us closing the gap for our focal group students from 84.3, and then our stretch goal would be 97% to get there. And then for our 9th grade on track, again, one of our areas of focus moving into this year is we're starting at 73.7%, and we would want to get to 84% of kids on track. The stretch goal matching our 5-year completer rate of 95, and then closing the gap between all students and our focal groups of students.
Our third grade language arts scores, current is 37.5 we're meeting. And if you look at our all students, it goes up to 50%. When we were meeting with the integrated guidance team from ODE, Dave and Stafford and I, we had, in a lot of these, we had bigger goals. And one thing that they pointed out to us, and they will approve them or not, is that the average third grade, the top 10 school districts in the state, their average growth for third graders was 3.4%. So those were the highest growth points per year. So growing in third grade reading on this is very slow. So we're hoping that we're actually going to the stretch goal, which is higher, but they will only approve within that range. So that's why our goals are really where they are. But looking at our focal groups, which we're really focusing on through our MTSS process, and our we're 19.2% currently is their starting data, and hope to get up to 50% in 5 years through our processes. Okay. And regular attenders, we talked about that earlier. Currently, 62% of our kids are regular attenders, and our hope over 5 years is to get that up to 68%, but our stretch is 78% of our kids coming 90% of the time or more. So each school, so when we looked at our strategic plan, these were our three goals: equitable outcomes and systems for all students, and you guys have all seen this: social, emotional, and mental health supports, rigorous and engaging academics. So we take this plan and our school data that we get from state report cards and the data that schools get from their formative and summative assessments and benchmark screeners, and that's when they begin to build their school improvement plans. And so school improvement plans, each school, you will see this. So when the schools come to report to you, they're going to talk about their goal number one and their data, what they started with, and their progress monitoring data. And then goal number 2 and number 3, you'll see the same thing on every report. All elementaries have a reading and math goal. And the third one is a choice. It might be behavior, it might be attendance. Something like that for all of the that. And then middle school is reading, math, and attendance or behavior, the same. And then high school, 9th grade on track, graduation completion, and advanced course enrollment. For elementary, some of our, the way we look at our data is through, we have a new screening tool, and it's called iReady. So we look at our reading and math, and we take that 3 times a year, all students K through 5, and it'll show where their strengths are, their score, and it'll also predict for 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders if they will meet the benchmark that SBAC in the spring. We look at attendance, we look at social and emotional competencies through DESA, and at the elementary level for DESA, that is the teachers have a online survey they do for each child, and it's about 8 questions. And then if kids don't score as high as they probably should, or we need them to be, they need supports, they'll give an extra, which is about 82 questions student, and then we group them and provide supports. We look at behavior referrals, and currently, if you're a parent, you've probably seen this right now, you're getting a Safe and Civil Schools survey, and that is taken by parents, staff, and students for kindergarten through 8th graders. And what they're looking at is, do students feel safe in the school? Do they feel safe in specific areas, like in the cafeteria, in the restrooms, riding the bus? So it looks at all of those levels, and principals break down that data and look at things around their school and how they can improve. Some of our actions are multi-tiered systems of support, which we've talked about a lot last year in our elementary and middle school presentations, where we look at data and we looking at the benchmark, then they give a diagnostic and they place students in targeted intervention groups to target the lagging skills. Safe and Civil Schools, which is our foundations, which is our overall behavior program within our schools, and how to help staff and students and everybody know what the expectations are. And social emotional learning, we have a curriculum, plus we do small groups based on data, DESA data. And we have QTEL instructional strategies. They're K-8. Some teachers have been trained, some haven't. So we have kind of a wide variety of teachers who have gone through that training, but they share their information and share their strategies. And then we work with a company called Education Excellence, and we're working on a guaranteed and viable curriculum. What we mean by that is we want to make sure that no matter what school you go to in this district, if you're a 7th grader or if you're a 3rd grader, you're getting the same standards and you're getting the same education as a student at another school. So we're just making sure that they're all getting the same standards, they're all getting the priority standards, and if you move from school to school, say it's December, you're going to move over Christmas break, that you won't miss the group of standards because everybody's pretty well aligned. So there won't be big gaps and holes in their learning. And professional learning communities, that's where teachers get together and plan based on the standard that they're going to teach, and they look at their assessments and look at what interventions are needed. And then we have 5 schools that are working on an attendance pilot, and we have 3 elementaries and 2 middle schools, looking at data, looking at interventions, talking about how to notify parents, and working with students, like what are their barriers for coming to school.
Similar at middle school, there are a lot of the same, in fact, all the same progress data that you'll see from our middle schools when they present to you. Also, a lot of the same priority actions that Sue just shared with you. A few unique that you most likely will hear from certain middle schools is our continued implementation of AVID around providing school-wide structures and cultures for academic achievement for all students, as well as the affinity groups that Kelsey spoke at that we've started up, and really targeting creating safe and inclusive spaces in all our middle schools, particularly for our students that have been marginalized. And this year, as you've heard in my first behavior presentation that you'll hear at the next meeting, is a focus on restorative practices in holding us all accountable when students are not behaving the ways we would want. And then finally, high schools. The progress data that you'll be hearing from them are grades, credits earned, those particularly numbers of students that are on track, attendance, the behavior referrals, advanced course enrollment. You should hear from them, which includes any viable CTE pathway courses and any courses that are articulated and can help kids earn college credit by taking that course during high school. And each of the high schools currently continues to conduct student and family and staff surveys. So you may hear some of that. Priority actions, we've partnered this year starting with the Center for High School Success, which has a long track record of helping schools and systems get better at supporting 9th graders be successful. So you should hear some of that. You'll hear about grade level teams, not just 9th grade, but 10th, 11th, and 12th, helping students move up and responding to students when they start to indicate that they may be falling behind. AVID also there. Affinity groups continue at the high schools. And then also, this is the second year we've been partnering with an organization called West Ed, particularly around professional learning for all staff around implicit bias and equity. And Kelsey and Ethan are partnering now with us with them. So like most contracts, we don't want to have their services anymore. So we'll integrate that in this year. And then also, again, edX working to create coherence, particularly between South and West, on how teachers get together and work together around providing equitable and similar experiences in the core content areas between the two schools. We know that was a lot. It was really to prepare you for future presentations that you'll be hearing, and hopefully with the repetition that will become more clear for you. So which questions do you have for us?
Sure, I'll go.
Yeah, go.
First, I think that's really important to see the demographics, the percentages, all that. I think one of the things that I do think we're doing a good job of, or at least trying to improve, by growing our own. You compare our students to our staff. Yes, pretty much everywhere in Oregon has the same problem. But I think we're putting some assets to training up some people to change that. I would say that I think we, even in tight budget times, we need to keep that program at least trickle alive. You know, it needs to be there so we can improve those numbers. The attendance issue, that's statewide. Unfortunately, it looks like we're below state, you know, which isn't good. You know, I mean, obviously, our kids can't learn if they're not at school, right? So that's kind of the basics, right? If we can't get them here, what's our chance of improving it? Not good, right? Unfortunately, my opinion, you know, before COVID, we kind of went away from truancy officers, all this different stuff. You know, there wasn't as much accountability for students, and COVID and a different society norm has happened, right? And so now we kind of have two factors working against that. I would really challenge us as a district to come up with some good ideas of how to get kids' butts back in seats. If they're not in the seats to learn, there's no chance.
I would love to speak to that. So Sue mentioned is like ODE, part of what they did is they've done these historical studies of the top districts and how much positive change they've made on those 5 metrics. The top 10 districts in our state historically have gotten a 1.2 percentage point gain annually for regular attenders.
Right.
That's very small, right? So, and the need is much greater, as we know now, than before COVID. So that attendance pilot, we've actually, our goal was to partner with the ESD that provided this attendance support. They stopped those services last spring. So in all our budget changes last year and having to make some tough decisions, we actually created an attendance position to work with those 5 schools to pilot, right? Something, systems and approaches and responses that are similar to what our truancy officers did pre-pandemic. So we're gonna try to learn from those 5 schools to see if what their gains are in relation to the other schools in our district, and to see if we can replicate that moving into next year. So that's when we say pilot, we're really honing in to see if we can be effective in certain spaces and then try to replicate that.
That's fantastic, and I'm certainly not trying to talk that down. I'm just saying I can't think of a bigger importance other than providing a safe space than having kids at school, right? I mean, have to be safe at school, but they also have to get to school. If they're not getting to school, none of us can have any impact on them, right? So that has to be racked and stacked up pretty high, and so that's all. The other thing I would say is my own personal opinion, and part of the reason I'm at this, you know, on this board seat, is I think we shoot ourselves in the foot for our 9th grade on track because of how we do middle school grades and hold kids accountable. Having coached 9th graders, I mean, they come to high school and they're used to a different system. They're used to getting 50% for not handing something in, you know? I mean, that doesn't happen in high school. And so you can see over and over again, and if you talk to the high school principals, they'll tell you they come not prepared. Now, we all know that kids going into high school, it's a learning year, right? But at the very least, they should understand the system before they show up. So when they show up and it's a different system than existed in the middle school, of course they're going to mess that up. And that would definitely be something that I'm looking to change.
Pete, I just want to say so that we've contracted with the Center for High School Success for 2 years, and that's in their actual year 2 of their playbook. And so first is really tightening up and making sure we have systems set up to be able to identify students that may be struggling and off track, and then providing interventions. And then the second year, we get to exactly that question. So that's something we'll tackle next year really systematically, about the discrepancy between what 9th graders need and how we're structured and what we provide for them.
And I would say I want to push harder, you know, because, I mean, so how hard is it to change that? You know, it's not that hard to change the fact that 8th graders are held the same accountability as 9th graders. You know, I mean, they need to know that. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, for me, what my life and what I wanted to do in my trajectory, I needed to have good grades in the 9th grade. If I showed up and didn't know the system and had bad grades, I probably wouldn't have got to do what I wanted to do. You know, how can we justify that we're not giving those kids that same heads up, right? I agree. It doesn't, I mean, so what if their 8th grade grades aren't that great? It doesn't matter. It doesn't come up in a college entrance exam. But their 9th grade, that matters. You know, and it's not hard to change that. I mean, that's getting in on the computer system and say, hey, no more 50% for nothing. You know, I mean, kids need to understand that they get credit for work. You know, if they don't hand in an assignment or the assignment's late, I've never had a job that if someone tells me something's due, you know, this Friday, Pete, you got to do it. I turn it in late or show up a month late. I'm lucky if I have a job, right? And as kids grow up, we don't want to hold them accountable ridiculousness. You know, we're not going to do that to kindergartners. But really, I mean, some of our kids are going to go to high school, and that's going to be the end of their education, right? We need to have them ready for life. Ready for life means that they know they need to show up, they need to do things on time. And if they don't do that, there's consequences. That's just reality in our world. You know, and if we want them to have success in life, I think we're doing them a disservice to teach them anything else. And I think our middle school grading policy, or it's not a policy because it certainly is something we made up, I don't think that does that. And I think we need to do a better job of that.
So I would just make the comment that last year, I thought it was a good process where we approached behavior with the concept of learning together. And I would think that I cannot sit here and tell you how this came to be in this district, when it came to be. But there are different research supporting different places. And I think that it would be important that we would work with teachers, some parents, and learn together.
Let's start
again.
tomorrow. You know, I mean, we can do this. You know, this is not hard lifting.
Did our middle schools move off the standards-based system, the 1, 2, 3, 4? Because that's in 2020. That's
Yes.
what we were doing. So this is new. What you're talking about. So
Yes.
I didn't
So-
even realize this is a whole new system.
So not too long ago, we didn't even give grades. We did the standards.
Right.
You know, and probably 3 or 4 years ago, we started doing this. But the way we did it was we did with some guidelines of minimum grades, like you got a 50 no matter if you turn
But
in
it's a
your
letter
homework.
grade system. It's a 90, 80.
It
70.
is, but it's not the same letter grade
I get it.
system that normal
Okay.
is, you know, and they did have a working group, but you talked to that working group, the majority didn't think what we were doing was the right thing, but the leadership did.
Yeah.
And so
Interesting.
that's what happened.
Yeah, I guess context for that decision would be helpful. Because
Yeah,
I didn't even realize we switched it till just now.
Well,
And I know you've been complaining, but I thought you were complaining about the standard system. I didn't realize we switched it.
Well, one of the things that I've learned in my year here is no one runs a process like Mr. Stafford Boyd, and we can give some thought to like what the antecedents are and how this came to be. What are
okay.
the beliefs underlying? And I think in the behavior group, I thought there was great learning on all parts. And I think that's something that we can start with. Learn together, figure out what is done, why we did it, and then we can begin to figure out where to go.
Okay.
So on the where we've been page, you mentioned a bounce back for four-year graduation and ninth grade on track after the lockdowns. Why are you not? Why, in your opinion, why do you think you're not seeing a bounce back on the other metrics? Third grade language arts, eighth grade math. Why do you think those are not seeing the similar bounce back? Because in my personal opinion, seeing the green as being negative 19% for a change, I don't think that's a green. That's a red in my opinion. If something gets 20% worse the next year, that's tough for me to see as a positive.
Yeah, Sean, when our secondary administrators reviewed all this in August, they had the same reaction. So I'm glad there's symmetry of that reaction. I think on our accountability details report, if you saw middle school math growth in middle school math, there's a lot of level 4 and level 5. So there's some indicators, at least in the data, right? So then we have to go in and ask some questions. And specific to that middle school, because there's that 8th grade metric on our district report card, is 2 schools started using what we actually brought to the board and adopted last year. So not only the diagnostic iReady, but our teachers recommended that we also invest in the aligned curriculum. And because one of our middle schools has federal Title I dollars, they invested in the curricular pieces of that. And that's the spaces where we're seeing, number one, we're seeing good gains. And then our multi-tiered systems of support at middle school, last year we were in year 2 of really intensive support from the state level at the middle schools. And I think the 2 schools, so when you get down, if you get down to drill down into these school reports, the 2 schools that, from my assessment, have the tightest systems of support, multi-tiered systems of support, are showing gains and change in the positive. So that's where, again, really down in the weeds of this, that's where we can start to say, okay, hone in, see what's working, right? And then shift our support to those spaces that isn't indicating that level of growth to try to replicate that school to school. That I can speak to 8th grade math. I'll let Sue speak to 3rd grade reading.
Okay, for 3rd grade reading, if you look at this, actually, our last year's 3rd graders, look where they were in K and 1. And we have amazing teachers in our elementary, all teachers, amazing teachers in our district, but trying to teach phonemic awareness and phonics online to a 5-year-old who's sitting at home or a 6-year-old was really, really difficult. And so they came with a lot of holes. We noticed that that first year back, a lot of our 2nd graders didn't know their letters and sounds. And so we had such a long ways to go back to bring them up. And so it's taken a long time. We do have targeted interventions, and teachers are really good about really focusing on the skills that students need. But it was rough. It was rough on little ones trying to learn to read. And not an excuse, but just reality. And so they are really working hard to bring them back up. And we now have a new reading curriculum also that we started last year. It's amazing. And that's also going to help eventually.
I think one more thing.
Yes.
One more piece to Sean, your question is, so this data in educational professional circles is called autopsy data because it already happened, right?
Yeah.
Like 84% of kids 4-year graduation, there's 16% that didn't, right? So that's happened. In math and reading particularly, with our change to iReady as our diagnostic, it does a much better job than our past tools of indicating where kids are in relation to state standards. It actually gives us reports that says, if kids took the state assessment now, how many do we think, right, would be proficient or not and score at that level? So I'm saying that because when schools come, they'll give you the in-time, most recent progress data from the iReady that will answer or get to your question. So that's why we wanted to prep you. Keep asking that question when schools get in front of you, because that's where it really counts. And schools will bring where they're starting from, right? Their big state accountability autopsy data, and compare with the iReady data to see where they are in relation to that. So yeah, keep asking that question. That's important.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge that, it was definitely no denying from my part that teaching reading via lockdown is extremely difficult. It's just more current research is showing that not being language proficient or English language proficient and being able to read, write by 3rd grade makes it extremely difficult to graduate on time and therefore continue on with career after high school.
Yes.
So.
Yep. That's exactly why those metrics, including 8th grade math on the state report card, are chosen as the ones to report out. Yep. Those are the highest correlates to success later in life.
And I would just add, we're working with McMinnville School District. They're going to come down and kind of give us kind of an overview, kind of a synopsis of our early literacy. And so I, out of curiosity, looked at their 3rd grade number, and it's about the same. And you're right, Sean, the kindergarten through 3rd grade is the time when kids are apt to learn to read, right? In fact, research shows that it becomes harder afterwards. And these kids were at home for a critical piece there. And so I think McMinnville is very prominent in this state for their academic programs. They're very aligned, do many of the things that they're talking about, and their number is within 1 point of that. So I think that this is also a real challenge for all schools in the state.
Yeah, can you go to the details reports achievement slide? I just want to make sure I 100% understand this metric. Okay, so level 5, that's 80%. That's the expectation. The state
So that's a statewide goal for the state of Oregon. 80% of kids meet or exceed
Okay.
on the state assessment.
and
Correct.
3 is the state average.
And that's the long-term goal. So
Right.
out to 27. Yeah.
Okay, and 3 is the state average. So the state average.
3 is the state average
54%.
in the
Okay.
2016-17
Yeah,
school
that was
year.
going to be my second question. That's not the average for this set of data. That's the average
No.
for some other set of data
Right.
that happened a while
The
ago.
level one will change year to year because that's the bottom 10% of schools every year is that cut.
Yeah.
So that will change every year.
Okay,
Yep.
that's interesting. It would be, okay. I did understand it. And the same thing on the cut scores is the growth, right? The 5 is what the state, so you scroll to the next slide, 5 is what they want to see, right? Kids making 5 points or more.
So again, these
progress.
were recalibrated after COVID. So the statewide goal after COVID, because the average learning loss and gap score from proficient down of kids negative change, right? So more kids are changing at a negative rate,
Gotcha.
was negative 19. And so the state set a goal of like, well, at least in the positive, which was the 5% change in the positive of the average kid's score per grade level. This in the middle school levels. So if you see that, we accomplished that for middle school
Yeah, I see that.
economically disadvantaged students last year,
Yeah,
which is
that's good.
amazing. Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood that. That's a different way of doing
Yeah,
it. too.
like, so that's like learning loss is real, right? It's
Yeah.
real. We see it right here in the numbers.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other thing you talked about, your priorities, and you listed out a bunch of things. And I know one thing Andy's talked about is focus on instruction. And you have QTIL up there and you have AVID up there, which both emphasize instruction, but you don't need a canned program to improve instruction. And so I'd really like, I get you have to give some to ODE, but when your principals talk, I'd like to hear them talk about how are they looking for good instruction, because high quality teachers with high quality instruction is how we move the dial. And so I just want to, you don't need AVID, you don't need to have high quality instruction, right? You can, good principal identifies, teaches, coaches good instruction on their teachers, and they should be able to talk in their presentation about how they're going about doing that, in my opinion.
So I would also say this, though, we should be adaptive to meet the needs of kids. And we see the needs of kids through feedback from MTSS measures, those kind of things.
Sure.
And so I think it's a combination of both the instruction, for example, green zone all kids, but also that we are adaptive and that we see the kids that need it and get that. And I agree with Stafford that the work that has happened in a couple of those middle schools is far more adaptive and has paid some dividends. The other thing is, when we see those trend lines, I was thinking about your comment earlier, there are things that are instructional, right? And then there are also things that are challenging, probably in the long term. So getting kids on track, getting them to graduation. The students that are most at risk of being the negative 5 or 10% on those are the kids that we don't have a program for, 9, 10, right? So we're gonna have to think about doing all those things and how they come together over the next couple of years
Yeah.
to get there.
Well, and there's a bit of a, my comment was gonna be the goals are too low, but I get why you do that with ODE, and you're working against lagging data anyway. So it's kind of like the whole thing. I'm not a big fan of how we're doing this, but I don't have a better solution either, so it is what it is.
Yeah, I think, Ryan, to that, I think the stretch goals was our original conversation as a leadership team. And then when we met with ODE and they gave us this research-based, what's realistic, right? Based upon what people have accomplished in the past, that's where we ratcheted down to that baseline goal. So I'm just glad they're asking for both.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan.
Okay, I have a couple things. So Pete and I have had many conversations over our years here on the board about the things that we think need to be done to improve. And it always comes down to the two linchpins of attendance and behavior. And so I'd like to hear more about your attendance pilot, a little bit about what sort of things are going to be done to try to improve attendance, kind of in some specifics.
Sure, let me put back up our attendance metric. Actually, let's put back up where we've been to help answer that. So when 4 out of 5 students are regularly attending, a truants officer can be very effective for those few families that are really struggling. When 3 out of 5 are not attending regularly, that becomes a huge investment in people to do that. So that attendance pilot, we are trying to get support from the ESD and this additional staff person to get better at matching. And some schools are lower than 57% regular attenders. And those are some of the schools we targeted for the pilot, is to match their systems of support around attendance, which is communication, building relationship with families, connecting them with a FACT team to provide them what they may need to get kids more regularly attending, is to match our capacity with our intervention response. So if we're only staffed, so if there's, say, 80 kids that our attendance data is saying are in need of extra support, but we only have the capacity as a staff to really impact, to do what we think would impact it. But to do it well, we can only impact 20 of those. Just do it with 20 and to see if that's effective, because that's where we get our learning. So there's that piece of like, it's so overwhelming right now that we're trying to do everything for everybody, and we just don't have the capacity to do it because things have changed. So that's one part of the pilot, to figure out what does work with families and then scale that up with capacity with the resource we have, human resource we have. The second piece is adding that member to the FACT team that just focuses on attendance, primarily to support these 5 schools, is doing that truancy, typical what we would consider truancy officer work. Go in, really get to know the families, right? Actually connect them if there's a rift in relationship between the school and the families. Be the Band-Aid, right? Be the connector. So what we traditionally think. So she is serving in that role as well, particularly for those 5 schools. So that's kind of the gist of the pilot. And because there are actually some strategies that weren't in our toolkit prior to COVID, and we're learning those at those schools and trying those. So that's really that again, and we'll learn from it. And hopefully in March we'll have a sense of how we can scale that up and what investments we might need, because we're in budget season.
So this program is ongoing now.
Correct. We started it this year with 2 middle schools and 3 of their feeders. Yeah.
Okay, and how often can we get a report back to see how effective it's been?
So Sue and I will give those 3 achievement reports. The first one will be in December 11th. We'll report specifically out on achievement, then March, then June.
Okay, great. And the other I wanted to, without piling on, reiterate Pete's comments on middle school grading. And it's something that we've talked about as well, and believe that there's a real need there to have a transitional timeframe in 8th grade to get them prepared for 9th grade. If we just wait and have a cliff, it's too much change. I think we really need to look at how we can make a transition period in the 8th grade to get them ready for 9th grade, so there's less work for the high school principals to do to get them ready to graduate. So really would like to see some looking at what we can do to change that.
Yeah, and I'll reiterate that with our partnership with the Center for High School Success, that is done in year 2. Who drives that work is the folks that are leading the work already at the high school. So it's going to be the 2 9th grade administrators and the 9th grade teams partnering with the middle schools to engage in those conversations. And I'm hearing it may need to be a broader conversation than just staff at the schools, but that's going to be who's, again, in that playbook of the Center for High School Success. So we have that planned starting next to go through all next year to really look deeply at that, but we can adjust those plans if needed. But that's who would be driving is the South and West 9th grade teams would be driving that conversation, engaging with our middle school staffs to come up with solutions.
Yeah, I just hate leaving this class behind. You know, the one that's there now, I'd really encourage us to look at doing something to try to get them more ready. Because from what we're hearing, it's not fun. So, and the other thing, for Sean's comment, the negative 19%, is another lowering of the bar. And we've seen that from ODE and a lot of things. And it goes against what I think we need to do. It appears from the outside looking in that the way ODE is trying to make us look good is by lowering the bar over and over and over again. High school graduation requirements.
Yeah, and I think, I agree in terms of we don't want to lower the bar. That's what I agree with. But in terms of our accountability system, so those accountability reports drive our state accountability system, which is lots of it is federally mandated, right? And part of those systems are identifying which schools need additional support because of their outcomes and providing that support. So our state has chosen to use the average as the starting point and recalibrated that average, because if we didn't, we would be allocating lots of support to almost all the districts across the state, and then very little funds would be, so it would spread those funds thin, and it would spread our systems of support thin. So it did ratchet down because that's a federally driven accountability approach that we are bound by. And so that's, I think, what drives that metric. I don't think anyone, even at ODE, is okay with that metric, that learning loss metric. So that's kind of why it is there. But I agree with you. Yeah, we don't want to lower the expectations.
Yeah, it was no intent to blame you. It was just noticing that it just seems to be a systemic problem that we need to find a way to correct as a society because we're going down in our learning ability, not up. Anything else, guys?
Thank you, guys.
Anything?
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, business financial report.
So the report that I've given you tonight doesn't change significantly from last month, but there were a couple things that I wanted to just draw your attention to. The first one's the beginning fund balance of 14 million. So that's the number under the July column, the bottom of the revenue. That is a projection that I believe is the best number at this time. It's not audited, so it could change, but I don't anticipate it to change significantly. And then I have gone in and revised some FTE. We've had grants that came in differently than we budgeted. The PE grant came in less, and our early literacy grant came in a little bit less. So I've adjusted FTE, which means I've moved FTE into the general fund. And so you can see salary and benefits are almost at 99%. I also have taken my best guess at what classified bargaining will result at. You can see January salary and benefits increase. And so all of those pieces contribute to salary and benefits being 99%. And I kind of see that as hopefully worst case scenario. And then what all of this means, if you look at the budget column, the green numbers at the bottom of the budget column, the 4.7 million, the 8 million, that is our budgeted contingency. And that's the number that is 12.7 million. You add those two together. That's what I hope we have as a ending fund balance. Like that's our budgeted ending fund balance. So we have only 980,000 difference between this projected ending fund balance and that contingency number. And so as we go forward, there will be lots of changes. You know, our ADMR can change. In December, in January actually, we'll get the report through December student count. And so in January, I will recommend to ODE that we adjust our ADMR based on what those results are. I also will recommend that we adjust our state school fund if our taxes come in significantly higher than what I've projected. So there, $1 million in our $127 million, that's not a lot of difference. So I will be watching that, and we can't spend into that contingency without your approval. And so that was important for me to show you tonight, and just that we will be watching that.
Any questions?
Just a statement. I appreciate all the work we're doing on this. We need to keep it tight. I know we're closing the loops and we're figuring out where the money is. That's really important. The fact that you have come on board and like I talked about, everyone else is putting priority on this is keeping us out of position that other districts are in. So we need to keep the eye on the ball. So thank you very much.
Roger.
Good evening, everybody. Sorry I'm late. I was in Sweet Home talking about fish and dams and ecosystems, and happy to be here. Jane, the beginning balance, so you have the budget number. The beginning balance that in the budget was for this current year. At what point do we project beginning balance for next year?
That is the 12.7 that I was referring to. Our built-in contingency becomes our ending fund balance for 23, 24, and of course, 24, 25's beginning fund balance. Did I understand that question right?
So if I'm understanding correct, the 4.7 and the 8 becomes the 14 for the beginning of the next year, correct?
It's actually 12.7, but yes.
But that was the goal of 14, yeah. That's what
Yes.
that's supposed to be, okay.
There's been a little fluctuation there. You will note that if you take the beginning fund balance estimated, and it shows us 14 roughly now. If you look all the way across, you'll recall that it was 15 when we adopted the budget.
So was that like balances in a bank or just a projection at that time?
Projection at that time.
And so what happened then is the actual beginning fund balance came in round numbers, $1 million less than that. And that has no reflection on the cash flow of this current budget, right?
No, it was just the best projection at that time. Our substitute cost came in higher. I wasn't aware that substitute costs hadn't been accounted for. So, and we had contracts that we paid that I wasn't aware of. And so we are putting in processes. We're collecting all of the contracts at this time to make sure we know where they're expended, to make sure they're encumbered. So I don't know 100% that all of our contracts right now are reflected in this report, but that is a goal that we're working on.
But also, one of the things we've done is we have limited the number who can sign contracts, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
So we know who all can do that, and that'll be obviously very important.
Yeah, and the other thing is we really didn't understand everything that wasn't included in our budget planning until we truly finished the year, saw the bills come in that we weren't aware were coming, right? And that happened up until June 30th. And so it's going to be a couple-year process here. Obviously, we have new auditors. We should be able to get to normal operations, not this January, but next January, to truly capture everything, correct it, move forward, and make a third correction where we have an audit done by December 31st.
So the auditors are scheduled to come in the second week in December, and their contract is for an audit to be completed by the end of January. And so in February, they will be making an audit report to you.
Which is better than last year, and then
better.
the year after that, we're moving it up again, right?
Right.
So, excellent.
So does anybody remember what we projected the deficit spend to be when we approved the budget? Was it $2 million?
$2.5 million a year.
And so based on your current numbers, we're gonna gain half of that back? Because
I see what
the
you're
current deficit would be 12.7, and we were at 14 when we started. And so if you,
But
See what I'm
Jane, you can talk about this a little bit more. The variables that remain to be seen in the projection with student enrollment in other districts could change that, property tax. I mean, there's a lot of things that will probably change as we go forward.
well, they can change both ways, right? I mean, the other
That's
thing.
true.
The other thing, if you look at salaries and employee benefits, which is the biggest number on this thing, we've gained 1% to budget only in a, what is it? Is it 5 months of actual? Is November included in this?
No, November's not included.
So only the first 4 months. So in 4 months, we gained a point. And if that trended over the next 8 months, we in theory could be at 97.
That's correct.
Good job.
Although we will be incorporating this settlement eventually with the classified into that, which will probably lower the margin of capture. But it's projected out to be that
And that is retroactive on salary, but not retroactive on PERS.
But I think Jane's generally
Yes,
accounted for that in
That's
this.
correct.
That's a good question, though.
Gentlemen, anything else? Okay, let's move on to operations and bond report. Mr. Bolin.
You're like a student.
Okay, seeing we're pretty late, I'm gonna zip through this as quickly as I can. But I thank you for the opportunity to present to you tonight. You've seen this chart quite often, as I've reported. This is some of the actions and goals that we're trying to achieve through being more customer service oriented. I mentioned last month, we did a survey, and I'm gonna show you some results of that. So we sent this to all of our principals and office managers. We had 21 responders, which is really low. I hope in the next quarter we have more responders give us feedback on our survey. So I just want to acknowledge, I think there's about 80 people in this group, so it's a pretty low. But again, it gives our the operations staff feedback, and the written comments that they had were just as powerful as the graphs that I'm going to show you. So sharing those written feedbacks really fuels our work there. So we asked 4 questions, all these departments, about communications, about the interactions they're having, work getting done with tech and facilities, and then just please rate your overall satisfaction. So what I'm looking for here is, it's a 1 to 5 scale, 5 being outstanding and 1 not. I'm looking for scores more to the right than the left is what we're looking for here. So just with low respondents, this was facilities, transportation, technology, and food service. All pretty much more to the right than more to the left. So that's showing me that our efforts are going noticed by some, although I wish to have, 80% respondents. We have about 20% here. But again, it shows good work being done in all 4 departments, and I appreciate their efforts. Visitations were a little bit lower in November. We had some folks that focused more on outside of the buildings than inside the buildings. So to have a visit, you have to check in with the principal inside the building or the office. So our numbers were just a little bit lower moving forward. HMK activities, transportation department, we're working on some minor issues out there with that facility, with the HVAC, the floors in the facility, and the asphalt outside against the building. We have a little bit of leaking going on there, so we're working on some resolutions there. Our South Shore Elementary, I was still working with the HVAC design. You might have heard, some of the systems weren't designed correctly to be able to have enough negative air in the attics to be able the doors to shut properly. So they're working to revamp that system and put some additional, I'm not going to say this right, but air moving outside the building and sucking some of the air, negative pressure into the building was off. So we're working on that. South Albany High School roofing repair, those trucks that came over the concrete, if you're there, crushed some of our concrete. So they are repairing that concrete moving forward. In fact, we've put a little bit of money into contingency instead of just fixing half of the repair. We went ahead and paid for the other half, so we're fixing the whole thing and doing it the right way. I'm looking forward to that. The transitioning is continuing to go well with HMK. December 15th is the end of our contract with HMK. Our projects updates, the big one moving forward is Sunrise Elementary School. The pre-bidding was done November 15th. All bids are due December 7th, and I expect to have a motion and recommendation to you on the January 8th board meeting about moving forward with that project. And this is a summer completion project. Central Elementary School, the update is the testing was successful. We had 1 unit in there at the time. It's a smaller unit. We've modified our design. We are going to go with a 1 unit design instead of a 2 unit design. In order to do that, we had to modify some permits. And once that gets done, we will be ordering and getting bids. Once our bids are completed, we'll get everything ordered and ready to go. So we're gonna go to a little bit larger size unit there, but just one instead of two, less space in the classroom. And we're looking forward to completing that, getting that done at least by the end of the summer. Just some department highlights. Cancellation of routes, we had a few more. We lost a couple relief drivers. We had some sickness. We did have about 50 daytime trips done. Facilities is completing a lot of work orders and keeping up the pace there. Technology, we're down 3 employees there right now, so we had a little increase in tickets not being closed, and our response time is still very strong. Last month, you guys approved a large technology plan. We're working on that. We have received all 800 units, desktops in our district, and we're starting our planning with building projects. And I'll tell you that maybe in the future technology updates, I can share with you the work that they've done with the inventory. It's really impressive what they have put together for you, and maybe in the coming months we can share that with you. And then food service. With only have all of our schools are CEP schools except for 2, we're seeing more lunches and breakfasts being served. I added year-to-date numbers for you to review as well. So that concludes my report tonight.
I would say, thanks for doing getting surveys and getting responses. I think once the people realize that them having, responses to it will get some action, will help you out, but that's just natural.
Yeah.
Also, I'm real excited to see that we're getting some positive movement forward with Central. Central's been waiting a long time to have a lot of fixes, and they're getting closer and closer to having some more. So I appreciate that work.
Yeah. Team's done a good job with that. It's just taken some time. When you're dealing with old buildings, there's things that come up. So I think they have a good plan moving forward. We just had to get permits and we'll get things ordered.
Excellent. How are we doing on job orders and getting completions? A lot of times you'll give us the numbers of how many work orders are in and how many you've completed. Do you have that number with you tonight, or?
It was in there.
It was on there.
Zip by, okay, that's
Yeah,
fine.
I kind of zipped by it there, but
Are we keeping on top of stuff? I
we're
guess?
keeping on top. They're doing a great job. Both technology and facilities really doing a good job there.
Anything else? New business, I had a little, something I forgot to talk about in there. Andy, is it okay to talk about CTE tables and what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay,
So we are working right now, we're moving, and we'll be working at present, we'll just find Willing at this point and begin to move there. But there was no real barrier to relocating the south table, and the west table has always been present in the
Okay.
commons.
so to kind of let people know what we're doing, CT is Career Technical Education, and it's basically a way for us to try to put together students with businesses when they graduate to have jobs, right? And those are not going to college. And so one of the things, we actually had someone reach out and say, hey, my table is back by the office and no students come and talk to me. Can we do something different? So what we're designing is to put, probably after the first of the year, to put a table in the cafeteria where once a week is going to be our current start. A local business will come in and talk to students about what they can do after graduation, talking about job opportunities. And it's probably not necessary before that time frame because it's too far away for seniors to really be thinking about it. But we figure that right after the Christmas break is a great time to start getting some thought process on, okay, what comes next? And so we're going to try to reach out to our community business leaders to come in and spend one day, and then we'll rotate through the people who were there. And if we have good success, we can add more days. So I think it'll be a real good way to get people, the students, in contact with potential employers. So that's kind of where we're heading with that one.
We're on future business,
Well, we're on new business.
new business.
Yeah, do you have a future agenda item you want to add? Because we can move to that if you want to, or do you want?
Either one, it could come under either.
Go ahead.
Just push for middle school grades. I'm definitely, that's one of the big reasons I'm here on the board. It's almost 2.5 years in. It's, we're saying, hey, we got more time. We can do it later. Hey, we need to start it now. The other thing I would say is hearing a lot back from different people about Synergy. I understand Synergy is brand new, but everyone's having problems with it. You know, it's the way they track grades and how they track attendance and how teachers see what classes kids have and stuff. We need to keep putting the push on that. I understand, but it's got to get better. The other thing I would say that I really would like, and we can obviously talk about this some other time, but I'd really like for us to include in this year's what do they call it? Show and tells that the schools come on in here and tell us is I want one from middle school grades, or not grades, middle school sports activities. We've put money into that program. This is the third year. We've put $50,000 to each of those schools. Let's hear about the progress. You know, I understand we're adding to it slowly, and that's how you need to do it. But I think we need to see how that money's being spent and make sure that we're increasing what we're doing each time. That's it.
Anybody else have any new business that we didn't get to discuss? You kind of missed out. Roger, did you have anything?
Happy to be here.
Happy to be here. Excellent. Okay. Mr. Gardner, we have some administrative regulations that are changing. You're going to give us an outline.
Yeah, and you'll notice this is information only. There are a couple of things that did not get carried through in the policy readoption. One of the, I think, critical elements here, this I think could be something that we need to be prepared for, is the procedures for the reconsideration of instructional materials. And you will see that that's an AR at this point. And you can see that there are some recommendations for changes in that form as we bring it back. Correct. I understand that it is not extant or it doesn't exist right now as a policy. Is that correct?
It's attached to policy IIA, but the AR was deleted during the policy rewrite in error is what happened. So we're getting it reinstated.
So that is to let you guys know that that would be if we did have a challenge of a book. And we also are lucky to have Gene Gritter, the State Librarian of the Year, who is sitting on an OSBA policy committee right now looking exactly at this. And we'll be looking at, for example, classroom books in the elementaries, those sort of things, and how they might be incorporated into that process. But I think, again, it's going to be like the next couple that we're looking at. We need to have a procedure for how it is done, a process, rather than have nothing. So, per your request, we are working on a broad array of public complaints. We have several types. We are looking to put a kind of a stoplight traffic herder in our website that would direct people into the different processes depending on the type of complaints. For example, a bias incident complaint, a sexual harassment complaint, a general complaint against staff, all would have slightly different timelines and stuff. So we're working to put an organization structure. In the meantime, and for your help, if someone does contact you, we would ask that you would direct them to these two processes. I'm looking at O2, the public complaint form. And if you go into that, you can see that there is a draft. And one of the things I think is really important there is formal complaints must be submitted using this form. So every day our principals and our directors solve problems that people bring to them or send them an email about. That would not be a formal complaint. We would hopefully address that. But if someone did not feel like they got what they wanted out of that, they are free to submit a request on this form, and it would then have the timelines which come in the policy, right? And so one of the things that we have not always had, about halfway down the page, you can see requested solution or resolution or outcome, right? So that gives us an idea of how the parent would like the complaint handled, but it also puts us, gives us information here. Eventually, if you go to the next form, the next form is a submission of a complaint to the board so that there is a really clear declaration that someone wants to take something to the board. And what this would do is it would gather any information that had been, like the resolutions prior to that, the information regarding the complaint, those would come with that if someone were to appeal to the board. you guys would have a long list. That can help you guys as well as board members. When someone has an issue that they want to bring to you, you can point them to these policies. That puts them on track. You would only then be called upon to rule or to hear about something where there's a long case of the district's earlier responses and the original complaint.
Okay.
So,
Quick question about that.
Yes.
So you suggested if a parent reach out to us, we share this with them. Are you saying the draft that we have in this packet, or share that there is a process coming? And if there is a process coming, what's the estimated timeframe on that?
well, so the first thing we would ask that you guys check on is, to what level have they communicated with the teacher or the teacher and the principal? And then you could point them to this as a method to resolve that. And we should be able to, that is already attached, and so that is for your input right now, but this will then become a living document.
Okay.
So kind of what would happen is there would be an original complaint that would probably go to the teacher and then to the principal.
Could be informal.
Could be informal, correct.
Yep.
But once it gets on the form, and then it would
There's
go.
the timelines.
And there was a timeline. Now, one thing that I noticed on the forms that we did not add is a date of the submission. We might want to add a submission date on there so that we know when the clock starts.
Okay.
Right, so that would be a kind of an important.
Yeah, and it may be if it's delivered electronically, the timestamp of the arrival would be there, but
Yeah, well,
that's a good
yeah,
suggestion.
you just don't know if it's going to be in written form or if it's going to be a fillable form, like a PDF. I'm not sure exactly how this is going to be available online, so we'll wait to see on that. But, and so just Sean, to help you, so it would go through a process up to the superintendent. And then at that point in time, I think typically the superintendent would make a decision. And then if the parent or guardian didn't like that decision, then the next form going to the board would be filled out. And we would see all of the paperwork that came with it plus that other form. And then we would become the arbiters of the final decision.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it works.
I think the date is on the bottom of the form.
Well, it was actually, it was a,
It says date complaint submitted. It's right down at the bottom.
which form are we talking about?
I was looking at
Jail.
the complaint form.
O2, I believe.
So I have a question.
Oh, there it is. I just saw it. Okay.
Do we have roles here as elected officials?
Can you help me with your question a little bit better?
People reach out to us. They're our boss.
Sure.
We did this to help people. And is there any structure that allows us to do anything other than tell them to go fill out a form?
Well, one of the things we need to be careful of is that we may be the arbiters of this case when it comes back. And if you're too invested, you might have to recuse yourself and not be able to rule. So it's kind of a bit of a dance. And yes, we can help them with the process, but we're not going to go to the principal and advocate one way or the other. That wouldn't be our role.
I would differentiate, Roger, between, like, can we help people from a customer service perspective, those kind of things. Of course, I think if there is a complaint, though, which is based in policy or state law, I think that would be, clearly we would have to respond off of that basis. And you guys would not then be, hey, let's not apply those policies to this case. You guys would, of course, I would hope, want us to be responsive to the complaint against our handbook or board policy, those kind of things, first and foremost.
As I understand it, if we have a constituent who has a question or a concern, the way this is structured, we direct them to a form to fill out.
Well, and you could, I mean, I've had some people reach out to me and they said, well, what do I do? How do I do this? And I would walk them through the process so they understand what needs to happen to try to get resolution. And it's the board or the district policy to try to solve it at the lowest level possible. And so to get them to understand what needs to happen, what the next steps are, and help them go through that to help resolve their issues. I mean, or are you suggesting we do something different?
Well, Well, we should figure out how to be as, and maybe you all have, maybe to be as receptive and helpful as possible as their representatives. And because of the number of students we have and the number of employees we have and the number of schools we have, maybe that's the only way to do it,
But don't you see a difference between helping somebody and following a specific complaint procedure that results in potentially staff discipline or a change? I mean, right, I mean, to me, there's two different things.
So yeah, but so I guess what I'm saying is draw that line for me.
Oh,
I
gotcha,
mean,
yeah, sure, yeah, I would agree with that.
Well, so let's say that two people have similar complaints, and one of them emails Ryan, and he said, hey, this is a matter of, personnel or policy, right? And you are asking in your action for something that is detrimental to the person, right? So maybe a principal suspended a kid or something like that. You got something similar. If there would be an expectation that it would be different, I think that the risk would be that people would say, hey, send that to Roger, right? I mean, I don't think we want that, and I think we do need to follow our policies when we do this. And I get your idea of service. I think there are any number of things that we deal with informally among administrators. I think there are also ways that we can help people. There's a lot of people that call. I remember you getting a call from someone who wanted to help schools, those kind of things. Those are different, I think, than a true complaint. And I don't know that you guys it would be healthy for this district to enter into resolving complaints on a one-off basis. I think those need to be process-oriented and adjudicated fairly. If they are not happy with what we do, if what the principal does, what the director does, you would have a chance then to hear it if they appeal to you. But then you should have all the information when you get it.
And I just want to make sure we have a good paper trail.
Yeah.
So when it gets to us, we can see where it started and what the decisions were along the way.
That's right.
Yeah. Go ahead. I see your lips moving.
I mean, for me, and it's different because I know the system a little better, but, somebody says, hey, this happened and I'm furious about it. I'd say, well, this is how I think that should play out. You should talk to X. If you don't like that, you should go to Y, or this is how they should roll. Then I talk to Annie and say, hey, I heard this, what do you know about it? So I'm sort of helping them work their process, and I'm also making sure we're following ours on the other end. You know what I mean? To me, that's how you would operate a complaint like that, and make sure that our systems that are in place are firing the way they're supposed to, and that the person who has the issue knows how to get that dealt with in a way that hopefully works for them.
Roger, I think one of the things here is we're not trying to not allow us to help constituents. That's what we need to do. But in the history and through cases that we've looked back at, we haven't really had a good flow chart of how issues go through the system, and they've gotten dropped and thereby not been handled correctly. So we need some kind of flow chart or some kind of step-by-step process that these things move so that not only do we not lose them, but we're involved at the right place.
So if I have a parent amongst the group that I represent, call me or email me and say, hey, my child has food allergies, and I thought we've made arrangements with the school to get the proper food, and that's not happening. To tell them to go fill out a form just doesn't feel right.
Well, I would hope that in that case, that would be something that you could call and we could check out as well. Nothing here eliminates the idea that we can help people on short notice if needed.
Okay, all right.
It's more about the formal. When the informal doesn't work, we need a formal process.
Help people.
Well, yeah, and if we can do,
Formal, this form, that form, I mean, parents are entrusted with their kids. We should make this as user-friendly as possible. Sorry, thank you, I'm done.
that's what we're trying to do. I believe that's everything.
Yeah, and I think Dave has facility usage rules and procedures next, and then the next two.
This policy is really to bring it in line. I don't know how much detail to go in here with you, but we have a new system called FMX that we've implemented, it's beginning to implement in the district. So this is bringing it in line with that. Also with the change in staffing, so it's just an update to the policy with a lot of language there. But it also takes some of our planning for the outside entities that want to run our facilities off the plates of our buildings and put it in context with consultation with us at facilities. It's going to enable us to streamline billing, streamline reservations. And so I think it's just going to make us more systematic and more effective with the work that we're doing there with renting facilities.
On the facilities usage fees, I didn't see the event center. Is that part of that?
The event center is
That's
completely separate.
Completely separate, okay.
And we've looked at that already.
Yeah, I
believe,
just wasn't, I didn't see it on here, didn't know if it was supposed to be or not. So.
Yeah, completely separate. So the fees, you see that are a little lower than they probably were in the previous policy. We've done an analysis of neighboring school district and brought them into some sort of comparability to our local surrounding districts. So that's how that work was done.
I think this is great, and I would just ask that hopefully somehow with these fees, we're, especially for places we know we have to redo, that these fees are going into some kind of fund for that rainy day, for that turf change, that whatever it happens to be. I would assume that's your thought.
Yep.
Looks good to me.
All right, well, is there anything other business we need to attend to, or do we need a motion to go home?
I move to adjourn.
All in favor? Aye. Meeting is closed.